When you picture a medieval warrior, chances are they're holding a sword. For decades, books and films have convinced us that it's the ideal, versatile, and only worthy weapon for a knight. In reality, on the battlefield, the sword was often a weapon of last resort. Let's explore why the common sword was actually just an overrated piece of steel, inferior in effectiveness to almost any other ancient weapon. To begin with, a sword is an incredibly expensive item. Manufacturing a high-quality blade required the work of the finest masters and scarce high-carbon steel. For the price of one sword, you could arm an entire unit of spearmen. A sword is not just a piece of iron. It is a complex technological product of its time that required careful processing and constant maintenance. Besides the price, there was the problem of training. You cannot just give a peasant a sword and expect him to become an effective fighter. Fencing requires years of practice, muscle memory, and delicate technique. On the other hand, a spear is intuitive to anyone. Armies needed mass numbers, while the sword was a boutique item for the elite. Consequently, the sword became a secondary weapon for those who had too much spare time and gold. The sword's greatest enemy in the Middle Ages was the evolution of armor. By the 15th century, knights had turned into walking fortresses encased in full plate armor. Attempting to cut through a high-quality cuirass with a sword was utterly useless. Steel simply slid off steel without causing any harm to the opponent, while damaging the sword itself. Slashing strikes, which look so beautiful in movies, were completely useless against plate in reality. To somehow wound an armored foe, knights had to use various techniques that did not even come close to guaranteeing success. Then there was the Mordhau technique, or the murder stroke. A warrior would grip the sword by the blade and hit the opponent with the guard or the pommel like an improvised hammer. But this raises a logical question. Why use a sword as a bad hammer? Wouldn't it be easier to just take a proper warhammer or an axe? Blunt weapons ignored armor due to their behind-armor impact. In this situation, the sword looked like a fragile toy, incapable of piercing the defense. The average length of a sword is about 90 centimeters. Now imagine standing against someone with a 2-meter spear or a halberd. You simply cannot get within striking distance. The spear is the true king of the battlefield, which ruled for millennia. It allows you to keep the enemy at a safe distance and attack first. In a formation, the sword even became dangerous to one's own allies. Swinging a long blade in a dense crowd is a sure way to hit a neighbor. A spear, however, works in a single plane, making it ideal for collective defense. Most medieval battles were won by phalanxes and shield walls, not by sword duels. The sword was a last chance weapon for when your primary polearm broke. Essentially, it was the medieval equivalent of a pistol, useful in tight quarters, but useless as a primary tool. So why did everyone wear them if they were so bad? The answer is simple: status and fashion. The sword was a symbol of knighthood and noble birth. It was an element of civilian dress that hung comfortably on the belt during peacetime. In judicial duels and civilian skirmishes where armor was not used, the sword, and later the rapier, was undoubtedly a good solution. Let's summarize our little exposé. The common sword was too expensive to produce and too difficult to master. It was ineffective against advanced protection and lost in reach to any polearm. Its effectiveness against plate armor was practically zero, and its application in almost any medieval formation was extremely limited.